Hey guys, just to let you know before you watch this video, there were a few technical difficulties. So the camera that was facing me and Saadadeen is a bit blurry, the lens is a bit blurry, but don't judge a book by its cover. The quality of the content is still, you know what I mean? It's still unmatched. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video. Like and subscribe. See you guys soon.
This is independent. El Jefe, the boss, El Padrino. Do you know what I mean?
Every language.
Just exactly, the chief. All my time. I love it. But at the same time, it's like when you need to be vulnerable, it's like, first of all, how do I deal with this? Like, ew, I can't share my feelings. I'm independent. And other people are like, oh no, you'll be fine. Like, do you know what I mean? When you try to eventually share your problems with people, they're like, oh, but you got this, girl. You a boss, and you're like, do you know what? Even bosses need support too. Do you know what I mean?
Sulaiman, how's your week?
My week was good, bro. I had my first 2 lectures of the term on Friday. They were really cool. One was on how social mobility has changed in Britain since 1945, the post-war period. So that was very interesting. And my second lecture was on the Cold War and kind of the origins of the Cold War from like an American perspective. It was an American history paper.
Any gems?
Any gems? I would say, okay, let's talk. So from the first lecture, he talked about how from the period from 1940 to 1980, there was actually an increase in equality. So there was lower inequality during that period, largely due to the creation of the welfare state, NHS, the education system. Despite that decrease in inequality, people still felt more unequal in society and class consciousness actually increased. And that was to do with the fact that people still felt like they were being disrespected by their superiors. So there hadn't been an actual change in kind of cultural attitudes, just economic realities, if that makes sense, which was quite interesting. But yeah, that's enough of that stuff. Saadadeen, how was your week?
The more episodes we're doing, the more I see myself in all the other interviewees, kind of seeing how we're all very similar. You know, like what you learn in primary school and that. Talk about your similarities. Like,
yeah, that see them tweets and it's like, we all had the same childhood.
Yeah,
we did.
Well, you know that one tweet when it says, we all chilled with our friend for the last time when we were young. I was like, "Whoa!" and we didn't even know it. That's a deep tweet.
That's too deep for
That's too deep.
I can't.
Nah, don't worry, we're gonna call it back.
Interesting. So we got a very special individual in the room.
Finally.
Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi guys, my name is Wanipa Njovu. This has been a long time coming, y'all. Like, we tried to do this. I was sick. Things happened, but we're here.
We
By
are
God's
here,
grace.
man.
I'm a second-year lawyer at Trinity College. And I'm president of the African Caribbean Society. I'm also the BME officer of my college. And yeah, I'm just living my life. Really happy to be here.
One of us, another notorious plate spinner. She's spinning a lot of plates.
Some of them are wobbly. Like that.
That's it. We're gonna talk about all those plates today.
Yeah, wicked. Yeah, man. One of her. So let's start right at the beginning. What are some early memories that come to mind?
Early memories. I don't know if I can count these as memories. I just know they happened to me. But I was born in Zambia, 1999. My parents took the decision to move us all to the UK when I was 2 years old. I grew up in York ever since then. Very interesting experience. Not the most diverse place to grow up, but like retrospectively, it's taught me a lot about myself and really helped me grow as a person. So I think I've always been pretty mature for my age. And I don't know if I can pin that down to specific incidents happening, but I've always just felt like I've had to step up and kind of be a woman from early. And I think just the fact that I've always had this like desire to please my parents and make them happy. And I don't know, maybe that came from a subconscious awareness of the sacrifice that they'd made from a very, very young age. Like, I think just that whole beginning, the whole thing of us moving, the whole thing of us starting from the bottom and like my parents struggling and seeing them work really hard every day. That's not a specific incident, but I think that's definitely shaped me.
Something interesting about that, sort of looking back on your past and seeing how it shaped you, is one thing I've come to realize is that it's the older you get, the more you sort of look back and go, oh wait, that was a moment. But in that moment in time,
it just seems like something that happened.
It's just
another day.
Yeah, just another day in the office. But it's when you look back, you're like, oh wait, it's maybe because you start drawing dots and things like that.
How often do you lot reflect on the past, or how often do you lot reflect on your day or the week that you've had? Is it something that is important to both of you?
I don't necessarily think I used to be a reflective person holistically, in the sense that I've always been kind of a perfectionist. So I would only ever reflect, and not even in a constructive way, just kind of look back and beat myself up or like criticize myself if I had experienced failure. But now I've realized like you have to dwell on your successes as much as on your failures, because like you learn something from failure, yes, but you also learn things from successes. You need to learn, okay, what did I do right that made this go right, and how can I repeat this? And I think for certain times, I know we've like been talking about this a little bit before we started, but I think definitely my faith strengthening, like growing closer to God, has made me a lot more reflective, because like I'm now not just thinking like, how have I acted and how has that made Wanipa feel? It's like, how has that made my fellow brothers and sisters feel? How has that made God feel ultimately? And I think that's made me reflect more often. And it's not even such a thing as like, okay, let me sit down and write in my journal and like talk about how I've been acting. It's more just like every so often I just stop and think like, okay, am I, reflecting a character that I want people to see from me and that I think is the right person to be, you know what I mean?
What about yourself, Suleiman?
Over the last few months, I've started to journal, which has been really rewarding. Like I've started to kind of look back on what I was doing like a few weeks ago, and you forget everything you've done over the last like 2-3 months. So I do that on a day-to-day basis. I try to, and my friend actually bought me a monthly kind of calendar thing, which I've stuck on my notice board, which is quite cool because I can now see. And I've also got I've got 3 things. So I've got my daily journal, got a monthly big timetable on my wall, and Saadadeen recommended this. What's it called? Just a diary. Recommended this diary, and it's like
that one there.
That one over there.
Yeah.
It's a weekly diary, and it's really good because it has
a weekly thing.
And a pen holder.
Oh yeah, the pen holder. Okay, listen. If my diary does not have a pen holder, I'm not getting that diary.
Trust me, man. Like it's one of the only diaries that has a pen holder, which is so important because you always lose your pen when you have a diary.
It's
fully right. So yeah, it's sick because I can kind of view my life from 3 perspectives, like a daily, a weekly, and a monthly, which is quite good.
I like that.
You
You touched on your relationship with faith and at home. How did they come to sort of shape you?
My journey to faith has been very unique in the sense that it was very independent from a very, very young age. So I actually started going to church when I was around 6, 7, but I didn't go with my family. I went with some family friends, and I initially started going with them just to kind of like play with the kids, just like meet people, you're just little, you just want to hang out with your friends. And me and my brother used to go to church together just like that. Continued going, was hearing small lessons in Sabbath school, but like, not really deeping anything too much. My brother eventually stopped because he was playing football at the time. I kept going, and I began to like kind of understand things a little bit more, but I hadn't really internalized it too much. And then there was one point where my dad was really ill when I was about 12, that age. And then the way he was ill was like, it was like bad. And I didn't even fully understand it at the time. I just knew that this is not good. And just seeing the way the people at church acted towards him, going to visit him, and bearing in mind he didn't go to church, so they didn't actually know him, visiting him, bringing him his favorite newspaper, bringing him like yogurt, and just the way they would just pray with me and with him and for us, and just looked after me as if I was their own child. I just really saw through them God's love. And so after that, I just kept going. There were a lot of things. So like I stopped eating pork, even though people in my house were still eating pork. I obviously was observing Sabbath, so going to church on Saturday, that kind of thing. And just really growing in faith very independently. But it was nice to have the support network of church. But I think it was always a thing like I wish I'd had at home a little bit more. And then when I was around 16, 17, I started really talking about baptism. And like, I very conscious, like, and I do respect my parents, like they didn't really want me to take that step too early before I knew what I was getting into. And because they weren't too acquainted with the church in particular, it's like, you don't want your child to go off and sign up to this thing that you don't really know about. And it's like, what are you doing there? Like, what are they teaching you? But we were all going through some pretty difficult times as a family. And I brought them along to one service, and like it was a choir service, and I just felt something shift in the room, and like it was all very emotional. And I think my parents, for various reasons, like really decided that this was something that they wanted to partake in as well. And so they started going to church from around that time when I was about 16, 17. I got baptized in 2017, so I was 17 going 18 around that time. And yeah, since then, because I think a lot of people think that baptism, like once you commit yourself to God, or if you purport to do that, like then everything's good. But I feel like that's when things started going like this. I was being swayed, really just living my life lukewarm, kind of straddling, you know, everything that my friends were doing, everything like I thought I needed to do to fit in and to be cool, and like straddling faith and God. And I think in very recent months, I've kind of just come to that realization that like there's something greater than this, and I've just really tapped into God's love and just like really appreciated his grace, and it's just been very overwhelming, but I'm so happy for the journey. You know what I mean? I feel like it's because I'm quite an independent person, like even now I don't like being told to do things, you know what I mean? And I think that God knew that for me, my personality type, if I had grown up in a Christian household, maybe I wouldn't be where I am now, because I would have been like, why are you telling me to go to church? Why are you forcing me to do this? Da, da, da. But I really found it by myself, and I just think, you know, he really do know me. Do you know what I mean?
I'm really interested to kind of dive into that theme of independence and that independent personality type that you used to describe yourself.
If I look back, I have always been a pretty independent person. Like I did mention that I've always kind of wanted to excel academically. So at school, I was always independently learning afterwards so that I could further myself, be the best. Similarly, like with my identity and like discovering who I was, because I grew up in a predominantly white area. My school was entirely white. Like that journey to self-discovery of my conception of Black identity and what it means to me to be a Black woman, that was all really independent, and I just kind of like spurred that on myself. And I don't really know where that comes from. I guess my parents are very independent, hardworking people, so I guess I picked that up from them as well. And in terms of coming to uni, my independence has changed practically in the sense of like, here you have to do everything for yourself. Like even just studying the course I do, law, it's very much like you have these contacts hours, very, very sparse, and then the rest is like, just read. Just read for yourself. Yeah, he knows because he took the plunge. Yeah, it's just very much figure it out, and it's like, oh, okay, so now academically I have to be more independent than I was. Also, like, you have to go out and find every meal for yourself. Like people don't actually do that about uni. Literally, it is a big scavenger hunt every single day.
What are the virtues of being independent?
The virtues of being independent, I think there are virtues, but there are also downsides. So virtues of being independent, I think my parents will testify to this, like I've not always so easily swayed. Like I was always that person, like if I was at like a little party in year 10 and like someone irritated me, or at a sleepover and I wasn't having a good time, someone irritated me, I will call my parents at like 3 a.m. and be like, take me home. Like I don't want to be here anymore. I'll deal with the consequences later, I'll deal with the friendship later, but right now I need to be out of this situation. So I've always been very strong-willed, strong-minded. Like if you tell me to do something and I'm like, huh? If there's doubt, I'm not doing it. And no one can make me. And I've never been been a person who's had that kind of like fear of missing out too much. Like obviously to a certain extent, when you're a teenager, you want to be cool, you want to be liked. But in terms of like, if everyone's going to this place and I know I'm not going to enjoy it, I'm not going to go just for the sake of, do you know what I mean? So I think that's been pretty good. The downsides though, I feel like once you're that independent, and you kind of create for yourself this persona of like, I love calling myself Miss Independent, you know, Miss Independent, you know, El Jefe, the boss, El Padrino. Do you know what I mean?
Every language.
Just exactly, the chief. Just, you know, all my time. I love it. But at the same time, it's like when you need to be vulnerable, it's like, first of all, how do I deal with this? Like, ew, I can't share my feelings. I'm independent. And other people are like, oh no, you'll be fine. Like, do you know what I mean? When you try to eventually share your problems with people, they're like, oh, but you got this, girl, you a boss. And you're like, do you know what? Even bosses need support too. Do you know what I mean? And like finally, the other downside is like tying it into faith again, because I like to draw the dots and make connections. I feel like definitely if I look back on certainly the early points of my degree, thinking I could do things in my own strength, oh, wow. You can just fail your whole degree. Like, I think now, like, relinquishing some of that independence and, like, putting my life in God's hands, it's difficult for me because I'm still kind of a control freak. I'm like, I need to be working every second, but God is telling me you need to take time out of your day to read and study my words. And trust me that if you take that time out, what you would have read in 3 hours, I'll make you read in 1 hour. And, like, being able to, that's faith. And it's actually a big plunge for me because like my personality type, independent, controlling, like wanting to have a hold on every situation, putting that trust in someone else, it's been tough.
Building up your personality and presenting that to the world, and the world receiving that and expecting
Exactly.
that from you 24/7.
100%.
And it's like, well, hold on. There's also bits that I'm not kind of like that. Or it's not just a sustained one identity.
Exactly.
It's more multifaceted than
And
that.
like more so, it's not even the fact that it's like, oh, I need support and people are thinking that I've got this and everything's under control. It's even just like when you're in positions of like authority at university, you become a representative. So right now, president of ACS, mouthpiece for like the black community at Cambridge. You know what I mean? Which is like whatever that means.
Yeah.
And it's like I get a lot of like young black women in particular, even sixth formers, messaging me on like Instagram, LinkedIn, asking me like, oh my gosh, how do you do this? Like, I'm trying to do this. How do you do this? And it's like, I don't necessarily want to give off the vibe that you always have to be this put together Michelle Obama, business suit, hair, you know, makeup, smile, because I need to, like, you want to show people like it's okay to be vulnerable. Like everyone has, no one is like this perfect, solid model of a human being where like you don't have feelings, because like I would never want to give off the perception that those feelings of vulnerability equate to weakness. Do you know what I mean? Like you don't want to, because that's not healthy. That's not a sustainable image to attain.
And it links a lot to how there's a rise in people having like a brand on social media and having a public profile. Like it can be very easy to just showcase your success. Like everyone always talks about how LinkedIn, people just hear about the successes.
LinkedIn.
And I heard
LinkedIn.
one of my friends, said
that
everyone should have 2 LinkedIn accounts where they put all of their successes and all of their rejections and failed interviews and failed applications. And I was like, that's a really good idea, because I mean, like, and to be honest, I don't even know how I conceptualize failure in the first point anyway, because like, what does it mean to fail? Because from failure you get experience, from failure you get feedback.
It's
like
true.
you can't, like, what does it mean to fail? Like
one thing that's helped me in terms of implementing it into my process is asking for feedback. And in terms of failure and how that links, it's like changing the perspective you have towards experiences, because failure is an experience that you deem to be negative in a sense, right? But going into a situation and being like, I am going to learn from this. And it to the Conor McGregor that says you either win or you learn. So it's like, even if I don't get the outcome, there's a bigger picture.
The process.
There's a bigger picture. And that bigger picture is me building up who I am and putting things in my bag and adding things to my toolkit. And for me, seeing things in that way, in terms of the bigger picture way, is always very helpful. Because ultimately, we're not defined by our failures, but we're not really defined by our successes either.
It's
like,
true.
But Cambridge, alright, cool, but like, what and what?
Before moving on to your time as president of ACS in Cambridge, I really want to talk more about your time at York, your time in York, and your secondary school experience.
Yeah.
So really flesh that out for us. Like, what was it like being one of the only black students in your school?
I went to a different secondary school and sixth form, and my experiences at the 2 different schools were very different, both because I think of who I was surrounded by and experiences I had, but also who I had become. So I think from the age, like from secondary school age, so like 11 to 16, like the large majority of that was really spent just not really, I didn't really deep that I was different, in the sense that I knew outwardly I was different, and I knew that there were certain things, like if we're in history class and we talk about slavery, people's necks are going to crack to look at me. Do you know what I mean? So I knew certain points, I knew I was different, but I think I was just so concerned with trying to numb those differences and just trying to like play up to the role of like, okay, I'm different, but let me be different in a way that's pleasing to other people.
Palatable.
Like, palatable, exactly. I'll be the token black friend, like, ha ha ha, I make jokes that, you know what I mean? And looking back, like that was actually kind of sad. Like it's quite a sad existence, and I think it's one of those things where if I could go back, I probably wouldn't change it because of how it shaped me. And like I think I let a lot of things slide. So I let people touch my hair all the time without even asking. I would never say anything. I let people make little comments, like stupid comments about having dark skin, which like now I know would be racism or microaggressions. By the time I was just like, okay, I'll just kind of let them pick fun at me just because it will be easier to just, you know, not talk about this elephant in the room that I am clearly different, at least on a surface level. Like I'm black, they're white. When I came towards the end of secondary school going into sixth form, I really started to just develop a self-awareness, and this came like really simply just through like social media, looking at, you know, Black empowerment, like Melanin Queens only pages on Instagram, and just like watching certain documentaries and stuff. And I kind of started to find out more about Black American culture, but I think that was a really good starting point for me. And I was just like, okay, wow, this is not cool. This is not cool. And I kind of always felt it, but it kind of gave validity to like the feelings that were legitimized. I was like, okay, so other people are experiencing this as well, and this is how they're dealing with it. And so I went into sixth form like ready for like, if anyone tries me,
come outside,
have mercy, because we will scrap. So I started a blog. It was called Melochrome.
It's always a blog.
It's always a blog. You have to. You have to.
Is it still operating?
Huh?
Is it still up?
It's on the internet somewhere. I don't add to it, but so I started the blog Melochrome. I thought it was really clever, monochrome, black and white, and it was just about my experiences growing up Black in a white society. The first article I wrote was called "The Bifurcated Existence," and it was about how I was like too Black for the white kids, too white for the Black kids. Do you know what I mean? Because if I ever went somewhere else and met a lot of Black people, they'd be like, oh, like, why'd you talk like that? Like, oh, you don't know what this is. You can't even, you know, Zanku. And I was like, oh, no, I don't know. Do you know what I mean? And so that was about navigating that experience. And then as I got more into it, me and my two friends, like the topic started to get a bit meatier, you know, a bit more, we were feeling very bold. And there was some articles in particular we wrote about, for example, like you can't use the N-word. And this is when things started stirring the pot, because a lot of people who I thought would, you know, support me and be behind me, turns out they weren't too happy with that. And so I actually had a lot of incidents towards the end of sixth form where someone commented on the blog being like, oh, if you hate whiteness so much, why don't you go to Africa? And I was like, okay, that's all right. We just wrote a follow-up article. It was no big deal.
When everything's going well, everyone's cool beans. But it's when something comes up and that causes a little bit of friction, things start to unravel.
People's character.
Exactly.
Because it's like, it's kind of like you've been friends with these people at a certain level and you've all got into your roles. So I've sunken into my role of being the token Black friend. I can make jokes. I can make people laugh. Like I let a lot of things slide, and people are comfortable with that. But as soon as the boat gets rocked slightly, it's like people's true character, which you wouldn't see in any other situation, just really comes out, and you think, like I'm thankful for those times because it's like a lot of that extra baggage. I don't need it. You know what I mean? So and I think now I'm like a lot more intentional with my friendships as well, just in the sense of like I'm not someone who really needs to be surrounded by a big group all the time. Like I'm very happy to just sit in my own peace for a while, very happy to just have a couple close friends. So it's like if I identify something in someone's character that like this doesn't really sit well with me, it's not like it has to be a nasty like, oh, I'm cutting you off, like we're not friends anymore. It's just like I'm happy to keep my distance and just keep my inner circle good energy. Do you know what I mean?
Sulaiman, how do you think your criteria for friendship has changed as you've gone older?
I remember you talking to Samuel about this. Like back in the days, it was all about who's gonna back the beef. You know what I mean? But now it's much more. You know what I mean? Much more wholesome than that. It's really about people that they have core characteristics like integrity, humility, perspective. People that align with your values and kind of understand our place in the world within like a larger framework and larger kind of like within the grand scheme of things. Yeah,
I like to have people in my inner circle who are ambitious and who have vision, people who have like goals that they're striving towards, people who aren't happy just being stagnant, because it really helps you. It's like I had a friend recently send me loads of PDFs of like books, like really encouraging, motivating books. Like, yes, that's what I want. I want people who are going to build me up. I want people who are going to be like, oh, hey, I watched this video. It like really enriched my life. Like, do you know what I mean? Like people who are building themselves up and want to see you prosper as well. And for me as well, like I mentioned faith, I recently realized that like having friends of faith in my inner circle really close to me has been so important, so encouraging. It's a really difficult journey. It can be like a really narrow and difficult path, but like having people to support you is so crucial.
I don't think that we stop looking for cool people. We just change our definition of cool.
I
think that's really the case. And before we come to an end with this conversation, let's really talk about your time at Cambridge. Let's talk about your time as the president of ACS. Like, how has Cambridge shaped you? How has being the president of ACS shaped who you've become today?
So I think being the president of ACS has like taught me so much about myself, who I am as a leader, how I deal with failure, how I deal with, you know, people not listening to me, how I deal with being a role model. You see a lot about yourself, not just good things. You see bad things about yourself and things that you want to look back at and be like, okay, I don't think I want to be like this again. Let me adjust how I speak to people. Let me adjust how I manage people. It's been such a roller coaster. It's been intense. It's been a lot. Like, sometimes you think that being the president of a uni society, you think, oh, it's not that deep. It's just a uni society. And then you realize, like, no, like, let me just sprinkle some goodness on our name. Like, we are Cambridge ACS. Like,
Takes every whole life.
Literally. And it's like the things we're doing are beyond just a society in university. It's not just about, you know, throwing parties, having a good time. Like, we're really impacting young people's lives. Like, we're being role models. We're helping young Black people see themselves in these institutions. Like, that's so important. And the way you carry yourself and the way you conduct yourself, just the way you make people feel is just so important. And I'm just so grateful for the experience. Like, it's just put me on platforms that I never dreamed of being on, or never dreamed of being on this young. And I'm so grateful for the experience. Like, if you ask me, like, looking back, would I do it again? 100%. 100%.
Wait, let me flip it, and I'm just gonna say one final point on this this question. Something that I've struggled with at Cambridge is the relationship between self-care and self-development. So you kind of spoke about how we need to know our limits.
Yeah.
And for me, that's such a difficult concept to grasp, because like, I don't want to have limits. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I want to be someone that can do everything, right? And it's knowing when to stop, when like you can't physically work 24 hours of the day. You can't be super productive, like productive management, right? Like we live in a culture that's very, I mean, like hustle culture. Like it's all about how many side hustles do you have. It's all about the money, monetizing our hobbies in every way, and it's just we lose that presence when we do things. Yeah. So the relationship between self-care and self-development is something I'm working on right now.
Yeah. Like you said at the start, I'm the plate spinner. I am the chief plate spinner, and I'm telling you, a lot of them are, you know, wobbling. A lot of them look like they were gonna fall. There's been times where I've been at a very, very, very low point, and I think once you get on the brink of that stage, you have to just be like, I can't come and kill myself. Like, I literally just can't come and die, because this is even scripture, but what does it profit a man if he gains the whole world and loses himself? Do you know what I mean? I'll leave you on that.
Let's leave it on that, man. we ain't gonna talk that.
I have to say, you guys, thank you for having me. And I really have to say, I think you bring out the best in people, really and truly. So thank you for this experience. Love, guys.
Much love. All right. That's it.